And welcome back. We're going to be talking about the Axis forces today of World War II. Last time we talked about the Allies, the West and the East, and now we're going to talk about those nations that were set on the other side of the conflict, and we call them the Axis powers. They technically were allies, but we seem to forget that. So we're just going to follow some basic themes throughout these nations here. And these are all pretty distinct and interesting, and each has their own different methods and such. But all of these nations fell under these fascist regimes that totalitarianism, the idea that a leader or a few leaders have the knowledge and ability to control the country over a democratic process. They also favored the authoritarian control of the government, so they were very much about secret polices and cracking down on civil liberties. They favored government control of the economy. In Italy over here, Benito Mussolini, this guy, Benito Mussolini, he formed what they call them syndicates, which are basically government and business collusions or cooperatives that cooperated to earn profit, but not necessarily to help the fellow man. They also all had a distinct distaste of communism, and we'll see that thread pull all the way through. All these nations really did the best they can to suppress communist theories and thoughts and protests, and that was the other main idea over here. In the Soviet Union, you had that too. So really didn't like communism whatsoever. And they also produced sizable militaries during the 1930s, which was a huge issue. A lot of it was to avoid the Great Depression or to get themselves out of that distinct issue. But they all produced sizable militaries. Military spending increased 5 to 6-fold at least. And then during the 1930s, you also had increased territorial claims. And we'll learn a lot more about that in the origin section. But what we're going to do is just kind of go country by country of the main Axis powers. And over here we have Germany. Germany was kind of the main aggressor we know as. And after World War II, Germany was led by the Weimar Republic, which was a democratically elected republic that most of the nation were either not too excited of or extremely disliked. Those guys like these dudes. These were the Nazis. These were high members of the Nazi Party. Hermann Goering, Joseph Goebbels, Chief Information Officer. Hermann Goering, of course, would become the leader of the Luftwaffe. You also had Heinrich Himmler, who controlled and was sort of second in command to this gentleman, Adolf Hitler. Now, this is an excerpt from Triumph of the Will. And Triumph of the Will is a famous movie of the time glorifying the Nazis. And this is actually the last speech of the movie itself. So there's this guy introducing Adolf Hitler. And we'll go to the end of the video because I think that's some of the most important. Such an interesting view of what happened in Germany and the kind of popularity Adolf Hitler had and the things that he was going to do to save the German people. I mean, it was truly an amazing part of history, though it turned out to have incredibly awful consequences later. Adolf Hitler, of course, was a member of the National Socialist Party, though he has that word socialist in there. Now, we were just talking about how they don't like communism and socialism, but of course, I think the most important word there is National Socialist Party. They were a nationalist group. The Nazis would actually grip the nation, and a lot of times, once they finally took control, would actually marginalize a lot of the political competition. The regime created a lot of secret police units. Over here, as I said, you have Heinrich Himmler with the Gestapo that's executing a Russian citizen, as well as there's this SS. Heinrich Himmler, of course, most famously leader of the SS, second in command. This was a military SS unit, the SS Viking, but there are also civilian units too that would patrol houses and such. And a lot of people have that Holocaust view of what the the SS did, which isn't totally wrong, but they were kind of involved in the whole scheme of things in a lot of different areas. And you have this really interesting anti-Semitic propaganda here. Here you have these creepy looking Jewish folk who are trying to take away Germany's monies and things like that. That was the thought of the time, that the Jews were stealing from the German people and that they needed to be aggressively wiped out. I think this is one of the better ones. You have an old Jewish man with the Star of David behind the veil of the Soviet Union, the United States, and Britain. So just already forming that idea that the other side was influenced by the Juden at the time was big pull for a lot of the anti-Semitic rants and such at the time. They proclaimed that the Aryan race, the white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed race, they were the Übermensch, the Supermen. This was the idea of Nietzsche's Übermensch. Though this has nothing to do with the Aryan race. Nietzsche had no intention of trying to say this. Nietzsche, of course, was not an anti-Semite. He didn't mind Jews whatsoever, actually. And Nazis actually twist a lot of popular philosophy and science and create these quasi-scientific theories like eugenics and other things, and experiments to prove the superiority of the race. So I mean that's one huge aspect of Germany as a whole. And just a reminder, I think I put the most amount of people in this slide, but you have to remember that most of the people who are actually moving and swaying the world, though you have people like Adolf Hitler giving these ridiculous speeches to the people of Germany and them all being very happy, these are the people who are changing Germany here. All these people hiling to Hitler, and these military units who are out doing. So as much as I focus on major characters of the war, you have to have an interesting idea of all the individual people underneath Himmler and his lieutenants and their lieutenants and sergeants and privates. So there's so many more people who are part of this huge movement, and these just to give you an idea of who was in charge. So always keep an eye out with that in history. I think people get lost in this concept of, there's only 3 or 4 important people, when in reality there are millions of important people. We sadly don't have a time to cover them all. So we'll go to Italy now and continue on the idea of only covering a few people. So Italy, we have Benito Mussolini, who we were just talking about, the member of the National Fascist Party. They took power during the March of Rome in 1922. They also did Mussolini and the fascists did a very interesting thing. They actually answered what's called the Roman question. The Roman question existed for about 80 years previous to this, and it had to do with the status of the Vatican and the Catholic Church. And so Benito Mussolini, combined with Pope Pius XI over here, that's this guy in the chair, basically what they ended up doing was splitting Italy from the Holy See itself, creating the Vatican City in 1929. And of course, like the Nazis, they themselves had their own brutal paramilitary group. In Italy, they called them the Black Shirts, and they were the fascist soldiers. And a little interesting side note has to do with the Vatican and how during the war they were technically a neutral party because, of course, the Roman question allowed them to be their own individual nation. But there's a lot of speculation behind the neutrality of the Vatican and if they really knew what was going on with the Jews and lots of other stuff. I mean, we're not going to cover a whole lot of that now, but this gentleman here, Pope Pius XII, the middle gentleman with the white robe on. He would be the acting pope during the war effort between 1939 and 1945, and there are lots of questions surrounding this man's papacy and such like that. But as I said, something we'll cover in another lesson some other time. Going on, we also have the Japanese. The Japanese at the time were having their own democracy movement that was viciously quelched. is a good term for that. Here we have the U.S. and British influences really industrialized the nation and turned it into a very prosperous area. And what happened is during this time period you had the Tasho democracy movement, which was essentially a republican movement inside the Japanese prefectures to support democratically elected individuals to run the country. But that was squelched in 1925 due to the peace preservation law. And what this did was response into Russian communism and the expanses it was making in the areas of China and also Eastern Asia as well. And the funny thing about this is that Showa technically means period of enlightened peace and harmony. So all during this World War II era, you have this misnomer of the Showa dynasty led by this gentleman here, Emperor Hirohito, who we'll hear more about in the future. And this is of course Hirohito here. And over here we have General Tojo, who is the head general of the Japanese imperial forces during the war, and he will lead the fight against the United States and other allied nations. So we have Japan over here. And that brings us to the origins portion. So but let's just go back and take a look at the forces over here. So now we've essentially set the stage between the Allies and the Axis. We have the West and the East, who are technically we're putting in the Axis or the Allied category. Though as I said here, the China and the Soviet Union kind of play this really interesting middle role, especially the Soviet Union. And of course we have the Axis powers over here. And so what we're going to do in next video is talk about the origins of the war. So can't wait to see you then. And enjoy watching, and I hope you're enjoying learning as well.